In this equation here, we are being asked to solve for x, and we should notice a few things. First of all, x is in the denominator, and there's also a y involved in here. So what that means is we're going to have a solution for x that has a y embedded in it. So when we isolate x, y should be on the other side. So to do this, we want to get rid of the denominator. Before we can get rid of the denominator, we have to state the restrictions. So I'm going to factor the denominator first. And I end up with y times x plus 1, and that gives us the restrictions. Y is not equal to 0, and x is not equal to -1. So once I've established my restrictions, I can solve this equation. Now to solve this equation, I'm just going to start here, and I'm going to cross multiply this. So I have x minus 4 is equal to x squared y plus xy. Now this equation has an x squared in it. We're solving for x, so it's a quadratic equation in terms of x. So what I want to do is make it equal to 0. When I do that, I want to group my like terms, and I also wanted to establish what the coefficients on the x squared x and what the constant is. So my coefficient on the x squared is y. So I'm just going to rewrite it as yx squared, and that represents the a coefficient on the quadratic, plus I'm going to end up with xy minus x, and then plus 4. Okay, so keeping track of these coefficients, I'm going to use these coefficients, and I'm going to plug in these coefficients into the quadratic formula. So keeping track of that a coefficient, it's yx squared. That's the coefficient on the x squared term. I need to factor out the coefficient out of these x terms. So since I have two x's, I have to factor. So when I factor that, I'm going to end up with y minus 1 as my factor. And that y minus 1 then represents the b coefficient, which I'm going to use in the quadratic formula. And then the constant term is plus 4. So again, I first have to identify that I need to get the x out of the denominator. Once I do that, I should recognize that x is a quadratic, so I'm going to make it equal to 0. Once I make it equal to 0, I need to identify the coefficients a, b, c to be able to apply the quadratic formula to this. So there are my coefficients. So I'm going to plug that into the quadratic formula. X is equal to negative b. So b is the middle term, so I'm going to end up with negative y minus 1 plus minus the square root of y minus 1 squared minus 4 times a. Well, the a value is going to be the coefficient from the x squared, so that's just y. And then the c value is 4. So there's my numerator of the quadratic formula. In the denominator, I get 2a, so 2 times y. So there's my solution. Now I can probably simplify this a little bit. So I end up with negative, I'm going to rearrange that to 1 minus y plus minus, maybe I'll keep that in brackets, square root of y squared minus 2y plus 1 minus 16y. I'm going to group my like terms, and in the denominator, I get 2y. So simplifying that, y squared minus 18y plus 1. This is not factorable. It's not a perfect square, so we can't square root it. And that's all over 2y. So there's my final solution here. Okay, but the key again is we need to try to isolate the x, get the x out of the denominator, identify that it's a quadratic. Once it's a quadratic, we have to identify the coefficients, and then we can apply the quadratic formula.